Imagine for a moment that someone steps back from your life. They don't vanish out of anger or disdain. They step back to protect something precious, themselves. This is the world of the avoidant personality. To the untrained eye, it may feel like rejection, but in reality, it's an intricate dance of emotional preservation. So, when do they decide to reach out after no contact? The answer is never arbitrary. It's always guided by an internal compass, a measure of safety and readiness. Avoidants reach out when they've reconciled their need for space with their desire for connection. They wait until the emotional turbulence has calmed, until the fear of vulnerability no longer overshadows the possibility of closeness. Here's the fascinating part: timing matters more than words. The moment they initiate contact is a window into their inner world. They are signaling, I am ready, I feel safe enough to engage, I can honor both my independence and my desire for connection, and this moment, this precise, almost fragile timing, is what defines meaningful reconnection. Understanding this helps us respond not with impatience, but with awareness. We learn that our role is not to chase or pressure, but to recognize the significance of their outreach. It's a gesture of trust. It's an opportunity, if we choose to meet it with the same clarity and respect they've shown in stepping forward. The exact moment avoidants decide to reach out isn't a mystery. It's a reflection of emotional alignment. They reach out when the internal balance has been restored. When we understand this, we transform uncertainty into insight, distance into understanding, and absence into a bridge for authentic connection. Avoidant behavior is often misunderstood because it can appear inconsistent or contradictory to those on the outside. At the core, an avoidant individual's primary motivation is emotional self-preservation. They are not deliberately trying to hurt others or distance themselves for reasons of malice. Rather, their withdrawal is a protective mechanism developed over time, often rooted in early experiences where emotional needs were inconsistently met. This coping strategy allows them to maintain a sense of autonomy and control in relationships, which, for them, is essential to feel secure. Avoidants have a heightened sensitivity to emotional intensity. When emotions rise above a threshold they perceive as manageable, their instinct is to step back. This is not a reflection of their capacity for connection, but rather a signal that they need space to regulate their own internal state. Their withdrawal serves two main purposes: reducing perceived threat and creating a buffer that allows them to process emotions at a pace that feels safe. From an outsider's perspective, this may look like disinterest or rejection, but for the avoidant, it is a necessary pause to prevent emotional overwhelm. It is important to understand that avoidant behavior operates along a spectrum. Some avoidants may distance themselves gradually, while others may withdraw abruptly. These patterns are influenced by their attachment style, personal history, and the dynamics of the current relationship. Avoidants are often highly attuned to signals of perceived pressure or intrusion, and any indication that their autonomy is at risk can trigger retreat. This sensitivity is not a weakness but a form of self-protection honed over years, sometimes decades, of learning that emotional exposure carries risk. Another key aspect of avoidant behavior is their paradoxical desire for connection. Avoidants do crave intimacy and meaningful relationships, but they struggle with balancing that desire against their need for independence. The tension between these two drives creates a push-pull dynamic. When someone gets too close, avoidants retreat. When distance feels too great, they may long for engagement. This oscillation can be confusing for partners or friends, but it is a predictable manifestation of their internal conflict. Recognizing this helps to reframe their behavior not as rejection, but as an attempt to navigate complex emotional terrain safely. Communication patterns in avoidance also reflect their need for control and emotional safety. They may struggle to express vulnerability openly, preferring indirect or minimal communication during periods of stress. Their silence or limited engagement is a strategy to manage anxiety and avoid feelings of being emotionally trapped. This behavior is often misinterpreted as coldness or indifference, but it is crucial to view it through the lens of self-regulation. Avoidants are constantly monitoring their environment and their own emotional state, and their behavior reflects a careful calibration rather than arbitrary detachment. Understanding avoidant behavior also requires empathy toward the internal experience of the avoidant individual. Behind their withdrawal is often a complex mix of fear, longing, and careful calculation. They are acutely aware of the vulnerability that comes with emotional exposure, and any breach of trust or perceived risk can trigger defensive distancing. Their behavior is, in essence, a negotiation between wanting closeness and avoiding the pain they associate with dependency or emotional overwhelm. Appreciating this internal struggle allows observers to respond with patience and comprehension rather than frustration. It is essential to recognize that avoidant behavior is not fixed or permanent. Avoidants can and do develop healthier relational strategies over time, especially when they feel safe, understood, and respected. Education, self-reflection, and supportive relationships can help them tolerate intimacy without feeling threatened. By framing avoidance as a temporary and functional response rather than a personal failing, we gain a more accurate understanding of their behavior and create space for meaningful engagement when they choose to reconnect. Emotional processing is a central component in understanding why avoidants reach out after a period of no contact. Unlike individuals who may respond impulsively to emotions, avoidants often require time and space to sort through what they feel before acting. Their internal world is governed by careful observation and self-regulation, and reaching out prematurely can feel overwhelming or threatening. The period of no contact is not a vacuum. It is an active phase where the avoidant mind is analyzing, evaluating, and calibrating emotions to determine if reconnection is safe. During this internal processing, avoidants assess several factors simultaneously. They examine their own feelings. Do they genuinely miss the connection? Or is the longing influenced by external triggers such as guilt, loneliness, or social expectations? They also assess the emotional environment of the person they withdrew from. Avoidants are highly sensitive to cues of pressure, neediness, or conflict, and they are constantly weighing whether the interaction will support a balanced reconnection or reignite tension. This evaluation is deliberate and methodical, reflecting a cautious approach to vulnerability. Avoidants often experience a complex interplay between desire for closeness and fear of entanglement. Emotional processing allows them to resolve this internal tension. They might ask themselves, can I engage without losing my autonomy? Can I express myself without feeling engulfed? By processing these questions internally, avoidants are preparing themselves to reach out in a way that feels safe and manageable. This process often includes mental rehearsal, anticipating responses, evaluating potential outcomes, and considering boundaries. Such cognitive and emotional work is invisible to outsiders, but is crucial for the eventual decision to reconnect. The role of emotional regulation cannot be overstated. Avoidants tend to experience emotions intensely, but they may not always express them outwardly. Processing gives them time to modulate these emotions so that when they do reach out, their communication is controlled rather than reactive. This regulation reduces the risk of conflict or misinterpretation and ensures that the contact is intentional rather than impulsive. It is during this period that they determine in the timing, tone, and nature of the outreach, often aiming for a balance between intimacy and independence. Another key component is reflection on past patterns. Avoidants often revisit previous interactions, identifying triggers that led to withdrawal and assessing lessons learned. This reflection informs their approach to reconnection. They may recognize behaviors that previously caused emotional overwhelm and adjust accordingly. This is not simply about avoiding mistakes. It is about creating a framework where emotional exchange can occur safely. Processing involves integrating past experiences to make future interaction sustainable and less anxiety-provoking. Avoidants also use emotional processing to evaluate compatibility and alignment with their needs and values. They consider whether re-engaging serves their emotional well-being and whether it aligns with their desire for meaningful yet manageable connection. This assessment is highly individualized and introspective, reflecting a deep awareness of personal limits and priorities. The outcome of this process dictates not only whether they reach out, but also the form and content of their communication. Importantly, the processing phase allows avoidants to regain a sense of agency. By carefully evaluating their emotions and environment, they avoid acting out of impulse or compulsion. This agency is critical. Without it, reaching out could feel unsafe, leading to withdrawal or regret. The deliberate nature of their processing ensures that when contact occurs, it reflects readiness, confidence, and emotional equilibrium rather than reactive desire. Emotional processing is also tied to timing. Avoidants often wait for a window of calm, a period where internal emotional turbulence has settled, and external cues signal that connection is possible without threat. They are less likely to reach out in moments of heightened stress or uncertainty because doing so could compromise the safety they have carefully cultivated. Recognizing this timing allows observers to understand that outreach is not random. It is a reflection of resolved internal conflict and preparedness for interaction. Ultimately, the role of emotional processing for avoidance is multidimensional. It encompasses self-reflection, regulation, evaluation of relational dynamics, assessment of timing, and integration of past experiences. It transforms potential emotional chaos into actionable clarity. By allowing themselves the space to process, avoidants reach out with intentionality, demonstrating that their actions are guided not by whim, but by a carefully calibrated readiness to connect. Triggers for reconnection in avoidant individuals are specific, identifiable moments that signal safety, readiness, and alignment of emotional conditions. These triggers are rarely impulsive or arbitrary. They emerge from a combination of internal resolution and external reassurance. Avoidants often require both personal emotional clarity and environmental stability before feeling comfortable enough to reach out. Understanding these triggers helps observers appreciate why avoidance is not permanent and why contact often comes at a very particular time. One of the most consistent triggers is the restoration of internal emotional balance. Avoidants experience emotional intensity acutely, and their decision to reconnect typically occurs after they have achieved a level of calm that allows them to approach the relationship without feeling overwhelmed. Emotional balance does not mean the absence of feelings, but rather the ability to manage them. Avoidants often process moments of frustration, disappointment, or longing internally, and the moment they feel capable of engaging without losing composure can act as a signal to initiate contact. Another critical trigger is the perception of safety within the relationship. Avoidants are highly sensitive to signs of judgment, pressure, or expectation. They evaluate the relational environment carefully, looking for cues that suggest reaching out will not result in criticism, confrontation, or emotional entanglement. The perception that the other person respects boundaries, maintains their own stability, and will respond in a non-intrusive manner can catalyze outreach. This sense of safety often develops gradually through consistent patterns of behavior, patience, and respect shown by the other party. Timing and context also act as significant triggers. Avoidants often consider practical and psychological circumstances before initiating contact. They may wait for a moment when both parties are likely to have capacity for calm communication or when external stressors are minimized. External context can include changes in life circumstances, resolution of conflicts, or reduction of immediate pressures that previously made contact feel risky. By choosing the right moment, avoidants maximize the chance of a positive, low-conflict interaction. Triggers for reconnection are also linked to internal reflection on needs and priorities. Avoidants frequently ask themselves whether reaching out aligns with their personal values and emotional requirements. If they determine that contact will serve a meaningful purpose, such as closure, clarification, or authentic connection, they are more likely to act. This internal alignment ensures that outreach is intentional and not reactive, reflecting a deep awareness of their limits and goals within the relationship. Subtle emotional cues from the other person can serve as external triggers as well. Avoidants often monitor behavior for indications of patience, understanding, and emotional stability. Signals of support or non-pressuring interest can reassure them that reconnecting will not compromise their autonomy. Conversely, behaviors that suggest demand, dependency, or urgency may reinforce withdrawal. This sensitivity underscores why timing and approach matter. Avoidants respond to relational signals more than to emotional impulses alone. Memory and reflection on past interactions can act as additional triggers. Avoidants often review prior moments of connection and withdrawal, noting what worked and what caused distress. When they identify patterns that suggest a healthier, more manageable interaction is possible, they may feel confident enough to re-engage. This reflective process ensures that reconnection is informed, deliberate, and less likely to recreate previous emotional turbulence. Another notable trigger is the alignment between personal desire and relational opportunity. Avoidants often experience ambivalence, feeling both a desire for connection and a need for space. The trigger occurs when these two forces reach equilibrium, when they can simultaneously honor their independence and engage meaningfully with the other person. Reaching out at this moment is a demonstration of intentional balance rather than impulsive need. Internal growth and self-awareness can act as a trigger. Over time, avoidants may develop greater tolerance for vulnerability, improved emotional regulation, and increased confidence in navigating intimacy. These personal developments create a readiness to reconnect that previously did not exist. The trigger, in this case, is less about the external environment and more about the internal evolution of emotional capacity and resilience. Collectively, these triggers demonstrate that avoidants reach out not randomly, but in response to a convergence of emotional, cognitive, and relational conditions. Each factor, emotional balance, relational safety, timing, reflective insight, external cues, and personal growth, contributes to a state of readiness. Recognizing these triggers allows observers to understand that outreach is not a whim, but a carefully timed decision reflecting preparedness, safety, and intentional engagement. Self-awareness is a cornerstone in understanding the behavior of avoidants, particularly when it comes to their decision to reach out after a period of no contact. Avoidants are often highly introspective, monitoring their own emotional states, reactions, and patterns of thought. This introspection allows them to recognize when they are emotionally ready to re-engage. They pay attention to subtle cues within themselves, such as feelings of calm, curiosity, or a reduction in anxiety that previously made contact feel threatening. Without this self-awareness, avoidants are unlikely to initiate reconnection because the perceived risks of vulnerability would outweigh the potential benefits of engagement. Timing is intrinsically tied to self-awareness. Avoidants do not act impulsively. Their decisions are guided by a precise assessment of when they can interact without compromising their sense of autonomy or emotional stability. They are acutely aware of the potential consequences of premature contact, which could trigger emotional overwhelm or retreat. By attuning to their internal state, avoidants determine a window when their capacity for connection aligns with the relational environment. This synchronization between internal readiness and external context is a key factor in the predictability of their outreach. Self-awareness in avoidance extends to understanding the dynamics of their relationships. They reflect on past interactions to identify triggers of stress, conflict, or withdrawal, and they use this knowledge to plan more constructive engagement. This reflection is not merely cognitive but deeply emotional. Avoidants evaluate how prior patterns affected their sense of safety and autonomy. By doing so, they are able to anticipate challenges, set boundaries, and approach the other person in a manner that maximizes the likelihood of positive interaction. Timing, therefore, is not just about personal readiness, but also about ensuring that relational conditions are conducive to successful engagement. Avoidants also rely on self-awareness to manage expectations, both their own and those of the person they are reconnecting with. They often consider questions like, can I maintain balance in this interaction? Am I prepared for the other person's response? Will this contact compromise the autonomy I have worked to preserve? By assessing these factors, avoidants can avoid scenarios that might trigger regression into withdrawal. Timing is determined by the alignment of internal emotional equilibrium with the anticipated dynamics of the interaction, reflecting a sophisticated interplay between self-knowledge and relational awareness. Internal regulation is another aspect closely linked to self-awareness and timing. Avoidants monitor emotional intensity and recognize when feelings such as longing, frustration, or anxiety have stabilized enough to allow for measured action. They understand their own thresholds and know when engagement could either strengthen the connection or provoke retreat. This regulation ensures that when contact occurs, it is deliberate rather than reactive. Timing, in this sense, is a product of emotional preparedness, which is cultivated through careful self-monitoring and reflection. The principle of self-awareness also involves understanding personal growth and limitations. Avoidants frequently evaluate whether they have acquired the skills or mindset necessary to engage without triggering defensiveness or withdrawal. They may assess their ability to communicate effectively, maintain boundaries, and tolerate intimacy. Reconnection is often initiated when they feel confident in their capacity to navigate the relationship safely, highlighting the connection between self-awareness, skill development, and timing. External factors are interpreted through the lens of self-awareness. Avoidants assess relational cues and environmental signals to gauge the appropriateness of outreach. They are highly sensitive to indicators of pressure, emotional volatility, or neediness in others. By combining this external observation with internal reflection, avoidants determine a precise moment when engagement is likely to be productive and emotionally sustainable. Timing becomes a strategic alignment of internal readiness with external receptivity, ensuring that outreach is both intentional and effective. Self-awareness enables avoidants to approach reconnection with intentionality and purpose. The timing of their contact is rarely accidental. It represents a convergence of personal emotional stability, reflective insight, and relational understanding. By cultivating self-awareness, avoidants can reach out at a moment when they are prepared to engage authentically while preserving their autonomy. This principle demonstrates that their outreach is not random or capricious, but the result of careful observation, reflection, and emotional calibration.